Hey everyone, welcome back to the next part of the Learning Python with Blender series. And what we're going to do today is talk about loops. And in computers, and especially in games, everything is a loop. When you turn a game on and you tell it to start playing, everything it's doing is a loop. It is going over every frame, it is drawing the frame, looking for input, moving everything else to the next frame, and then drawing the frame. Sometimes the drawing of the frame could be at the beginning, at the end. It doesn't really matter. Just depends on how the game loop works, but it's always looping, 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 looping. Um, when you watch TV, it is going a single frame at a time at fast enough speed that your eyes don't know any difference. The same thing is happening in a game, except that while it's doing that um, movement for the screen, showing you what's happening on the screen, it is checking to see, did you hit any key? Did you move the mouse? Did you run into a wall? Did you run over something that starts a trap? Did you anything like that that's happening is happening that fast, which is why the better the game, the better the video, the more powerful computer you need, because that's all happening at the same time. Your TV is made to go 24 frames a second all the time. That's it. Actually, that's film. I think TV is 29.99, so almost 30 frames a second. Doesn't much matter, but that's it. That's all it's doing. Or a film is playing at 24 frames a second. That's all it's doing. Your computer is doing everything else at the same time. There are two main types of loops that we're going to go through, but we're going to have to touch a couple of things before we get there. First of all, we're going to touch these things up here. Whenever we work in Blender, we're going to need to import BPY. This is the library that allows Python to understand Blender. Python by itself, if you ran it in its normal IDE and typed in one of the codes from down here, so yeah, having lots of mistakes, and I typed this and moved over outside of Blender and put it in. Python has no clue what this means. It is the BPY library, which is a Blender Python library that allows Python to have a clue what's going on and what to do. In this little program we're going to run, we're going to use one library called random, which is a whole bunch of different ways of using random numbers. You can randomize through a list of 5 different names, and it'll randomly pick one. All kinds of different things you can do. Not the scope of this particular video, but I'm sure we'll get into it over time. And then the second one is time. The reason I'm leaving this one in here is because I want to make you be able to tell that a loop is running, and the computer is so fast that if we just did this, it would basically pop up on the screen and that would be it. You'd just see it happening, and we want to delay it a little bit so you can kind of see what's happening. So there are libraries upon libraries upon libraries. You can search the internet for Python libraries, and I have no idea how many of them you'll get back. My particular focus over the long haul is probably going to be AI in games. And in order to get there, you're going to learn data science, you're going to learn all kinds of different parts of data science, which could be the NumPy library, the Pandas library, the plot. There's a math library, there's a plotting library, there's a couple of plotting different libraries. All of those things just for that. There are then several different libraries that create machine learning. There are several different AI libraries. All of that stuff is what allows Python to do so many different things in the computer world. It's so wide that it can do just about anything, because it didn't try to do it all in Python. it made Python a very basic language that can do basic things, and then you add the library in, and you don't have to put all of that into memory. You only put in what you need, and we go from there. Great system, and it's something we'll be talking about again, because as we move over in certain courses and use Pygame or Pygame Zero or Arcade, those are all libraries in and of themselves that allow Python to do something different than just Python can do. All right, so I hope you understand that. And now we're going to move into the two different kinds of loops that there are. The first one is a while loop. The second one is a for loop. The difference is not very much, but the reason is different. In almost all cases, you use a while loop in order to... Things popping up on the computer. When you don't know how many times something's going to happen. So when you play a game and hit the run lock, the while loop would continue to leave the run lock on until you turn it off. So it has no idea when you're going to turn it off. It just wants to do it until you no longer have it on. So here we're just to go through the code a little bit, what we're doing, we're going to use our random here, and we're getting times, the amount of times I want the loop to run, and we're doing a random number. So random, an integer, which is only going to give you a whole number, as we talked about before, between 1 and 20. And then I need a counter here so that we know what's going on. So every time I would run this program, this while loop does not know until this happens. So when you're programming it, before you hit the play button, you don't know how many times it's going to run. So that's one of the reasons we would use a while loop. And then we'll show here that it's run this many times, sleep in between, and then this actually means this. I don't think we've gone into this all that much. And it will be something we'll have to cover a long time. But here's your variable, and this is something that Python can do that many other programming languages can't. We've got our variable, and then we're going to make it equal to that variable plus a number, or times a number, or minus a number. But this is how we can change the variable constantly by using that in there, so that if this is 50, we can make it 51. If it's 2, it can be 3. That's a very simple way of doing counters. And then what I had typed in here before, the plus equals, is just a very shortcut for that. Meaning you could put in minus equals, you can put in times equals, so that it can move up. If you wanted the counter to go like 10, you could do that. However you wanted to do that. So let's go ahead, and I have the other stuff all commented out as I put in, and we talked about the comments before. And we'll go ahead and run this and jump over here, and invalid syntax. Now see, this is plus equals, yep, because I have, almost did it. I have the equals still in here. So let's go ahead, and while we're at this, I don't remember if we've looked at this. In the earlier things that we've looked at. So when I ran this program here at this point, it said that this program on line 18, something's wrong, invalid syntax, meaning it doesn't know what to do, because this is what I had, equals plus equals 1. That doesn't make any sense, because you only use plus equals, or you use equals counter plus 1. So this doesn't need to be there. So it's telling you where it thinks the problem is and what kind of problem is. Syntax means you typed something wrong. You forgot a colon, you forgot, like this, you put something in wrong, you spelled something wrong. If you spelled print, P-I-N-T, you spelled it pint instead of print. All of those types of things are syntax errors. There are other errors, and we'll get to it. There's so much, and I'm trying to cover it so that it's interesting and doesn't go too deep. But if you go over to Real Python, and I'll talk about this right now, I recommend not just following me. I want to specifically talk about games and leave in that. But if you want to learn Python, whether it's for games or for anything else, take every course you can stand to take. There are so many free ones out there. And if you keep taking them, it will continue to repeat the same information and the same information. Well, if you take 4 courses repeating the same information, you will know that information. If you then grab one of the books that has Python code typed in, typed out to show you how to run a program, and you type that 2, 3, 4 times, you will know how to use the very basics. If you go over to Real Python, which I think this is a Real Python one. Let's go open this in a new link and go down to the learning paths. Whoops, back. So I'm working on that one. Go down to the learning paths. This is just one site, but let's take a look at their introduction to Python. Is 30 sets of videos. I'm on our 6th video. I'm going to catch stuff all the time that are missing, but you can just see this is how much, and this is beginning. If we go back and check the next section, there should be I guess they don't have an intermediate one. All of these are intermediate subjects. So math for Python, data science, data collection, data visualization. Then we get to DevOps. This is for web development. GUI program, we'll get through. Object oriented, that is considered a advanced path, but that's how Python works. That's how almost all games work, because everything that you make in a game is going to be an object. We'll get to it. I'm not going to go too far. I just want you to understand how much information is out there. If we go over to another good one that I'm going to recommend, FreeCodeCamp, and we're not even going to look for their things. We're just going to go for their certified thing. And you go down here, this is all web development, and that's fine because you can use and do use Python for back-end web development. You don't need to know what that means. But let's look here, scientific computing. So this is where you would begin to do machine learning, AI, data analysis, those types of things. And this is 95 lessons long. This is how much information, wait, that's 195, 35, 44. This is how much information. I think these are a little shorter videos, but it is a lot. So when I go through and we hit something that I forgot to touch on before, this is why. There's so much you can learn, so many different parts. I want to get you as best I can to learn Python and have fun making games or being able to use the information here in a more fun way that you might enjoy learning more than just taking tests. And if this doesn't seem to be for you after a little while, no problem. Maybe there's something later on that I will cover that you will like. But don't just take this. I'm trying to get you to understand something in a different way. They won't touch Blender in either of those 2 courses. It's not part of that. They don't really deal with it. Blender is its own little thing, but it is a great way to make 3D games. We can make 2D games. We'll probably look at Ursina, which is another way to make games. Disney put out Panda 3D, which is what Ursina is based on. It runs a multiplayer game for Disney and has for years. And then there's a bunch of other libraries that we're going to continue to learn and go over as time goes on. Hopefully this goes on for years. That's what my plan is. And so you can learn these things. But it's not the only part, and it's not the only way. And this is just a niche that I have been wanting to do for a long, long time. I don't know if I said it before. I have a game art degree. I know how to model. I've been using Blender for 10 years. This is a way of putting something out there that's just a little different. That's what you have to do these days. Find your own little piece of the world and try to learn. So, all right, we did all of that to get to this little part here. And we're going to run this and see if it'll work this time. And it does. And now while it's doing that, the while says the counter, which we started at 1 up here, is going to run as long as it's less than the number times. As I said, the times is going to be randomly generated every time we run the program between 0 or 1 and 20. And it's going to print, like it did here, the loop has run this many times. This is a print statement. And so this is going to run into our console. That's what a print statement does. Types into the console. And then, like I said, I was just having it, we'll run it real quick again. That's going to disappear. Just in order for you to watch that happen. Okay? And then we are increasing the counter so that it keeps going. And then the first time, the number must have been 11, because actually the number was probably 12, because it would not, if it's less than, it's going to go, but once it's equal to, it would stop. And so it ran that many times. This the second time, the number must have been 3, so it went through and did that. That's very, very, very basic, but it gives you kind of the idea of what's going on. And then let's quick jump over, and the next type of loop, we'll take out our comment here. And again, the 3 single quotes is the way to comment multiple lines. If you notice, it just commented the whole rest of the program until I put these in. In this one, I don't know where I just is using a for loop, and the for loop is done in this way. By the way, the while loop is while, and then it's going to give you a condition, whatever that condition might be, and then the colon, and then the indentation, which is how Python separates different parts of their programs. It's all done by indentation. So you indent 4 spaces. If you're in the Python IDE, the tab key will work fine. If you're using something besides an IDE, you might have to really play with the spacing. But they say 4 spaces is the indent for each level that you go down. And that's how it knows when to stop doing the code that works in the while loop, and why it didn't touch the print statement at the bottom till after it was finished with the while loop, because the print statement is not indented. Same thing for the for. This is going to use a I in range 10. So the for loop is going to run so many times within a set amount of times. There's a bunch of different ways we could set the amount of times. We could actually set it for the times variable that we used up on top, because by the time we got into the program, we know that's going to be a number. So it kind of could work either way in this situation. But like I said, if you were doing the numlock for your running in there, there's no way the program ever is going to know when you're going to hit to stop that from happening. That's why you would use a while loop. That's a great example of it. Whereas a for loop would be, let's say we're playing on a computer game, Monopoly, and you roll the 6, it's going to do a for loop because it's 6. That's it. There's no, at that point in time, when it starts the while loop, it knows to do the movement of that little marker 6 times, 12 times, whatever. It's an exact amount of times, and so we can use a for loop. And I is nothing more than the number we are counting, and we could use anything. We could put times, we can put counter, we could put anything in here, but it is simply, we are for every time or every one of, and in this particular case we're using range 10. So it's a function built into Python that says range 10 means make me a list of numbers from 1 to 10. I is each number in that list. So again, let's go ahead and run this, and you'll see the same basic thing happening here. Oops, I put the wrong, but it is running. And it's going to run 10 times and then be done. So let's see, I left it as counter. So let's just change that to I. And I'm sure you guys have questions. I'm trying to get over this again. Really hard to cover 30 different video, and understand that was 30 different courses, or as you saw on pre-code camp, however many courses it was, with 45 lessons or 35 lessons in each one of that sections. Those courses have anywhere from, I don't know, 5 to 35 videos on the Real Python. There's a lot to cover, and it's going to take us a while to get all the way through there. I want to show you how to do certain things. We'll never show it all. So again, this is saying we're going to print has run, and the syntax is everything in the loop is a string, comma, and then we're going to put the variable. So we don't want that in a string. The variables can just be a variable, and then the string times afterwards, as we saw happen. And again, we're simply using the sleep to let it run so that you can see it going. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, just to give you a hint, once this is done here, I am going to go ahead and remove this. And I am going to shrink this down a little bit so that I can move it over here, move this up over here. There we go. We'll do it like that. All right, and then let's go ahead and run the program. And if you're seeing me do this, I'm just using my mouse to scroll across that specific thing. But we removed the time, and you saw how it did it before. Now, boom, that's it. There's absolutely the computer. There's no difference in what's doing that. That's why I was using the time, so that you could see that the loop was actually running and it didn't just do it. Because this, if you would look at this, looks like it just happened. You don't, it's hard to tell the loop is actually there. So, all right, let me look at my notes and see if there's anything else. Cover, looks like I got through just about everything that we talked about. Again, the two different types are the while loop and the for loop. And the while loop we use when we don't know how many times, and the for loop we usually use when we do know how many times. There are other reasons as time goes on to use one over the other, but that is the basics of how that works. And we use loops because in a game, you're running a loop every frame. It's going through a whole bunch of things once every frame. That loop is going through, and then most likely, not only is that loop going through, that inside that loop, something else is happening multiple times within that fraction of a second. So 30 frames a second means 1/30th of a second is going through all of that information. So if you ever have your computer seem to like the game bogged down, and the best place to see that is in massive multiplayer games. I'm not sure how much it happens anymore, but it used to happen all the time way back when I started playing EverQuest 2 the day it came out. So not only was it a brand new game with everybody on, but everybody was in the same couple of places because everybody was starting their character. You had to look down at the ground because that loop could not get through all of those characters and get them on the screen without the whole thing becoming like you couldn't do anything because it took so long for the computer and the internet to go through at that 30 frames a second. So it was probably getting down to like 1 frame every second at certain times because there are hundreds of people within the view of your camera, and it's trying to grab all that information, draw that information, determine if they've moved, determine where they moved to, where to put the new information, all of that happening at the same time. So we've gotten through loops, and I'm only going to do one more in this very introduction to Python and Blender, and then we'll start moving over into some projects and cover all kinds of other stuff. All right, so I'll see you in the next one to wrap up this series.